The email arrived on a Tuesday, a sliver of cold light on my phone screen in the pre-dawn quiet of the barracks at Windsor Castle. The subject line, "A sensible path forward." 13 years of marriage, summarized and dismissed in a digital whisper. My name is Sergeant Thomas Croft, 42 years old, serving with the Grenadier Guards. I had been on this tour of royal duty for 3 months, a world of polished brass, precise drill, and public scrutiny. It was then that Eleanor decided she was finished with the life we had built. The message was brutally efficient. She had engaged a solicitor. The divorce petition was filed. She had cleared our joint savings account, and her business partner, a man named Julian, had moved into our flat in Kensington. I read the email 3 times, then I deleted it. I stood, showered in the communal block, pulled on my uniform, the thick red tunic a familiar weight on my shoulders. I said nothing to anyone. Later that day, as I stood sentry at my post, motionless for 2 hours while tourists took photographs, my mind was a fortress. That night, from a secure MOD, Ministry of Defense terminal, I sent a one-word reply. Acknowledged. Corporal Davies, my roommate, knew something was wrong. "All right, Tom," he asked, not looking up from polishing his boots. "Fine, Di," I said. "Just matters at home." He gave a short, sharp nod. In the Guards, you learn to recognize a closed door. The truth was, I had seen the cracks forming. 6 months before this duty began, things had changed. Eleanor, who worked in administration for a posh art gallery, stopped asking about my day. She spoke of new friends from her networking events, had new passwords on her laptop, and started talking about how our lives were on different tracks. She'd complained that my career was stagnant, a life of ceremonial irrelevance, not understanding the pride and commitment it required. I didn't confront her. My father, a regimental sergeant major himself, taught me to observe, gather intelligence, and then act with overwhelming precision. So I made my own preparations. I leased a small, climate-controlled storage unit in a discreet location. I moved my grandfather's service medals, my mother's jewelry, and the original deed to the flat, which was in my name alone, purchased with an inheritance from my side of the family. I opened a private bank account and began rerouting a portion of my salary into it. Enough to build a foundation, not enough to raise an alarm. The night before I left for Windsor, she gave me a brief, sterile hug. "Do try not to be so serious all the time," she'd said. It wasn't a wife's farewell, it was a manager's performance review. I knew then, but a part of me hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What she didn't know was that I was prepared. What she failed to understand was that a guardsman's greatest strength isn't aggression, it's discipline. And I never cede ground I am tasked to defend. 2 weeks after the email, a banking alert vibrated in my pocket during a break. A withdrawal of £25,000, almost the entirety of what was left in our joint current account. I called the bank from a private room. The clerk informed me that Eleanor had been draining the account for months. The largest transfers began the day after I reported for duty at the castle. That evening, I found Di in the common room. I don't share personal matters, but I trusted him. We'd served together in Afghanistan before this posting. My wife emptied the accounts and moved another man into our flat, I said, my voice flat. Sent me divorce papers via email. Di didn't offer pity. He simply asked, "What's the objective, Tom?" I replied, "Asset recovery and a clean extraction." He said, "Let me know if you need fire support." And that was that. That night, I logged into the security system for our flat, a system Eleanor had forgotten I could access from anywhere in the world. The cameras showed a man I'd never seen, Julian, drinking from my favorite whiskey glass, wearing my old regimental sweater. And there was Eleanor, laughing as he pointed at a painting on the wall.
a painting I had bought her for our 5th anniversary. The anger I expected wasn't there. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me. This was no longer a marriage. It was an operation. I made a lift. Contact Arthur, my cousin, a solicitor in London. Review mortgage and deed documents. Secure my pension with the MOD. Investigate Julian. The next morning, I had a secure call with Arthur. Discreet and urgent, I told him. An hour later, he called back. I'll get started. And Tom, don't engage the target. 2 weeks later, my tour at Windsor ended. I didn't tell Eleanor I was coming back to London. I took a room at a small hotel and met Arthur at a pub far from our usual haunts. "You look like you've been standing guard for a decade," he said. "Feels like it," I replied. Arthur slid a folder across the table. "It's worse than we thought," he said. "They applied to remortgage the flat to pull out £100,000 in equity. Since the property is in your sole name, your signature was required." He produced a document. My signature was on it, but it was a forgery. A good one, but the T was too looped, a detail she would never notice. The application was frozen by the lender pending final checks, thankfully. "She forged my signature," I said. It wasn't a question. "It gets better," Arthur said. "Her co-applicant, Julian Croft, he used your surname, has a history. 2 prior bankruptcies and an investigation for investment fraud." "What are my options, Arthur?" Arthur leaned forward. "You need to decide what you want. Do you want revenge, or do you want justice?" I thought of my grandfather's medals, of the uniform I wore, of the oath I took. "I want what is right, and I want them to understand that there are consequences for their actions." Arthur smiled. "Good. Then here's the plan." The next day, I went to the lending bank. I presented my military ID, my passport, and the forged document Arthur had obtained. The fraud investigator's face turned grim. "We'll have to involve the police immediately," he said. "I expected as much," I replied calmly. "I've already filed a report." That evening, a text from Eleanor. "Tom, the bank called about the remortgage. What have you done? We need to talk." I didn't reply. Arthur called the next day. "The police have opened a case file, and I found something else. Julian has been linked to a shady estate agent. They have a pattern. Find a vulnerable spouse, forge documents to pull out equity from a property, then pressure them into a quick sale well below market value. The cash disappears, and Julian moves on." This was not just a messy divorce, it was a criminal enterprise, and they had targeted a soldier on active duty. "The police are very interested in that detail," Arthur said. The next morning, I received a frantic call from Eleanor. I let it go to voicemail. "Thomas, please, the police came to the flat. They're asking questions about Julian, about our finances. He's been arrested. What is happening?" I was sitting with 2 detectives from the Met's fraud squad at the very moment. I played them the voicemail. Detective Wallace raised an eyebrow. "Her level of distress seems genuine. It's possible she was a pawn as much as a partner in this." I asked, "Does it matter?" Wallace said, "To the courts, perhaps. But our primary target is Julian and his network. Your testimony, the forgery, the security footage you provided of them discussing the sale, it's the linchpin of our case." I watched from a coffee shop across the street as they led Julian from my building in handcuffs. Eleanor stood on the pavement, her face a mask of confusion and horror. In that moment, watching the life she had chosen collapse, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just the quiet completion of a mission. The legal process was swift. Faced with the evidence, Julian confessed, implicating his entire network. They had frauded 5 other families, 3 of them military. Eleanor, in exchange for her full cooperation and a signed confession to the forgery, avoided prosecution. The divorce was absolute. She forfeited any claim to the flat, my pension, everything. A year later, I sold the Kensington flat. The memories were tainted. I took an honorable discharge after 22 years of service. I used the money to buy a small cottage in the Peak District. Stone walls, a slate roof, and miles of open moorland. I got a border collie, named him Pip. I started a small business, restoring antique furniture. The patient, methodical work suited me. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from a Royal Navy officer's wife. Julian had targeted them while her husband was at sea. The police told us your case was the one that brought them down. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to walk away. Thank